What up, fam? Welcome to Big Ray's Garage Grind, Mental Health Edition. My name is Ray Roberts. Most of you guys know me as a former Seattle Seahawk or Detroit Lion. I was a three-time All-ACC football player at the University of Virginia, two-time Jacobs Blocking Trophy Award winner as the top offensive lineman in the ACC, was a first-team All-American, and I was the 10th pick in the 1992 NFL Draft by the Seattle Seahawks. And don't let me forget, my jersey's also retired at the University of Virginia. I'm here today with two of my good friends, Michael Bumpus and Michael Sean Dugar, to have a great conversation.
Ray, tell me something. Why are we here?
I would say, Mike, the reason we're here, and this is really true and special to my heart, is that I want to bring awareness and my voice to something that's meaningful and purposeful, more than just who's the best football player, who's the best football team, but more around our mental health and our approach to mental health, the importance of mental health. And I also want to be an inspiration to other athletes to feel free and to feel confident and comfortable talking about their mental health and taking care of themselves that way.
Well, you got a heck of a story, Ray. And I think to really get to know you, we got to get to know who you are and where you're from. So tell me about your childhood in Asheville, North Carolina. Holla at me.
Well, Asheville, North Carolina is a little town up in the mountains of western North Carolina. So we're probably about maybe 60 miles from the Tennessee border, so about 100 miles from Knoxville, Tennessee. Not too far, maybe an hour from Boone, where Appalachian State is. It's just, the world beaters in college football nowadays. Not a whole lot going on in the town, and was raised in a family with three older sisters, so I'm the youngest of four. My mom and dad and my grandfather. We all lived in West Asheville, North Carolina, and we always called it West Hill. So you can imagine why we called it West Hill. It wasn't the easiest place to live, but grew up in like this little 700 square foot home with 7 people. So I shared a bedroom with my grandfather, my 3 sisters shared a room, and then my parents slept on a pull-out couch in the family room. So real small town, not a whole lot going on. At the time that I grew up, there was a lot of racial tension there. So there were just parts of town you didn't go at night and parts of towns where they didn't go at night. And so it just that kind of ebb and flow about it. Played high school football there, played Little League football there. Just a town. It's kind of like a sleepy town. It's like a retirement town. There's a lot of money there, but it's mostly money from people that are retiring there. Not a whole lot of industry there, so it's not a whole lot to do there. So, but playing sports was my thing and my way out.
What was your relationship like with your siblings?
Well, it was interesting because a lot of times, that whole phrase, we all we have, we all we got, we all we need, that stuff, that's what it was, man. It was just like the 4 of us finding a way to survive, not only just, in our neighborhood and just in the city, but, also our family. Like our family's pretty chaotic. My mom and dad, and I'll just say this off the bat before we get into it. I freaking love my parents. I love my sisters. There's no other family I would rather have than the ones I grew up with and the parents that I had. But there were things that happened along the way that just weren't so great. And that's just a lived experience, but doesn't change what my heart feels for my family. But grew up, both my parents were alcoholics, and I have 2 of my 3 older sisters. One of my older sister wasn't a drug addict, but got caught up in the drug game. And then my middle sister has been an addict for quite a while. And so just dealing with that kind of chaos in the family was always tough, like always trying to find a way to get yourself noticed, and trying to find a way to protect yourself, trying to find a way to be safety emotionally, physically, all those different things. My parents were janitors. My dad was a janitor at the middle school. My mom was a janitor at the elementary school, so we didn't have tons of money, but they hustled to make ends meet. My dad must have had 50 million jobs. Like he worked on cars, he fixed the house, he cut the grass, he did all these different kinds of things to make ends meet for us. So we were always, we had what we needed, but it was a battle each and every day to get what we needed.
You talk about your dad, man, and him having multiple jobs. When you're growing up as a kid, did you see your dad as like a hero? 'Cause I remember growing up looking at my dad doing all this stuff, and I'm thinking, man, how's he do it all? How'd you view your dad?
Yeah, my dad was the coolest dude ever, and I think a lot of who I am comes from him. This dude knew everybody, talked to everybody, and me, Bump and Mike, like I talked to everybody. Everyone's my best friend, and my dad was the same way. So whether it was the the brothers at the garage in downtown Asheville, or the white dudes up in the back of the mountains where they fight anything that had four legs. They fight with dogs, pigs, whatever it is. And so he would, he knew all those good old boys too. And so I always looked up to my dad that way. My dad was 6'4" and about 240 pounds, and always worked with his hands. So real kind of not big muscles, but strapping kind of a dude.
Grown man strength.
Grown man strength.
Yeah.
I've seen my dad lift transmissions up. But he can't bench press 135 pounds. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of stuff. But my dad was was like a friend to everybody. That whole thing of master. What is it? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
That was my dad. And so he worked on cars. He cut grass. He, cut wood for families. All these other knew everybody. Treated and as a janitor at the middle school. He was like the counselor in the school. So a lot of times kids would get in trouble, they send them to talk to my dad versus sending them to talk to the counselor, or a kid would get in trouble, like, don't call my parents, let me go talk to Mr. Roberts, like that kind of stuff. And so that's who my dad was, that, growing up, that I wanted to be like, that part of it, but, my dad was a tough dude as well, was raised by his grandfather, never graduated middle school, just kind of hustled his way, through life. And so, there's a lot of stress and things you're under. So that stuff manifests itself in different ways. And so for us, my dad was never, like physically abusive with me, but him and my mom would get into their fights, and they'd have their, those things. So those are, parts of my dad that wasn't so pleasant, and that, I always try to figure out, like, why is this happening? And how can I stop it? But my dad was a big dude. So how do I stop that?
Yeah. So I feel like I understand who your dad is. Hard worker, always had a job, knew everybody, was cool with everybody, and was the guy that people can confide in at school. So what's your mom? What's her role in the making of Ray Roberts?
Well, my mom had this tremendous smile, like unbelievable. Like, I get the dimples and all that stuff from my mom, just unbelievably beautiful smile. And then my mom was like the person that would give, like, the kids in the community, like, they could have anything we had, and we had nothing, Mike. When I tell you we had nothing. And so like for us, my mom would make a pot of beans and some coleslaw and cornbread. That's what we ate on the entire week.
Right.
So it wasn't like each day we got a different meal. Sometimes that happened. And then on Fridays, if she hadn't used the money to buy a bunch of alcohol, we might have, like, some pork chops. That was like our steak. Like, we were eating big when my mom made pork chops and gravy and some biscuits and things like that. But my mom was a sweet lady, just real, a lot like my dad too, just real personable. But my mom had this streak in her, like this mean streak. Like, once you cross her, it's over. You're not once you cross the line, you don't get the second chance to get back across the line. So one time, we used to have these. We called them poker parties, and so people nowadays call them casino nights. But it was the way we made extra money to get food. And so me and my dad would fish a lot. We'd fry all these make all these fish sandwiches, and then we'd have these poker, and I don't know if I'm sure you guys are familiar with tips and pulling numbers and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
We have all that stuff going on in the house, selling alcohol, selling. So me and my sisters are like serving everybody, collecting all the money and all this stuff. So one day my dad was away, and we're having one of these things. And so I was sitting between the two poker tables, and every time the deal came past me, I have to take money out of the pot for the family, for the house. And so I reached in there, and this one dude, Albert, grabbed my arm. And Albert was this dude that had been in prison a lot, so he had, like, this prison body. He was all yoked up. I'm probably, like, 12 years old, and I don't know what to do. I'm just like, dude, my dad told me to get this. And he's like, hey, he ain't getting this money, blah, 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 blah. So then I just put the money down, little kid, I'm crying. I go to my mom. She's like, what's wrong? Like, I said, I went to get the money. Albert grabbed my hand. And she goes, what? She goes, Albert grabbed your hand. I'm like, yeah. Albert put his hands on you? I'm like, yes. Dude, it was over after that. She went and grabbed Albert by the back of his collar and the seat of his pants, threw him out the door of our house, and when he hit the ground, me and my sisters were just all on top of him. Pop, 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 like, oh, dude, we were just giving him the business. And then my dad came home and was like, man, like, why is this big, like, dent in the door? We had, like, the aluminum screen door. So, like, yeah, Albert grabbed Junior, and that's what they call me Junior at home, named after my dad. And he goes, what? Like, Albert grabbed Junior. Like, yeah. Albert put his hands on him? Yeah, okay, I'll be right back. Went up the street. Albert had to take it again, like because it was just not happening. Like we can fight amongst each other,
Right.
but ain't nobody putting their hands on us. So that was kind of like my mom. My mom had big forearms. Like my body is basically my mom's body, except my mom was maybe 5'6" and I'm 6'6". But this is exactly how she
That's
was.
moms.
Yeah.
So, who was responsible then for getting you into football?
Well, that's interesting because I think that's part of this whole journey, to be honest with you, Mike, because there was so much chaos going on in our house, like all the fighting, and my sisters were, doing their thing in and out. And so here's me, like, just trying to figure out how do you process all this stuff that's going on. So you have all this pent up emotions and feelings. And at that age, you don't even know what that means. You know what I'm saying? Now I can speak to it. But back then I was just like, I just felt nervous and scared a lot, And so I went to this, I had a cousin that was playing football, Little League football, and I went to a game, and I was maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, and every time he made a play, people were patting him on the back, hitting him on the helmet, like, high-fiving him or whatever, and I was just like, something in my little uninformed, undeveloped brain was like, you need some of that. And so I remember being about 6 years old, and I was standing on the sideline, tugging on the shirt of his football coach saying, like, hey, I want to play. And he's pushing me back. My cousin's probably like 14, 15 years old. They're pushing me back. And so the next year I started playing football. And it just seems like the more ass I kicked in football, the more adoration I got from the adults around me. And so I was just like, okay, I can just come out here and I can beat the hell out of people, and people pat me on the back for it. That was stuff I wasn't getting at home. People weren't telling me, like, how great I was or, hey, good job and all that kind of stuff. It was just too much going on. Just everyone is into their own stuff. And so that's what kind of got me into football, is watching my cousin play and then looking at, like, honestly, it wasn't even like him hitting people or scoring touchdowns. It was just like watching how people reacted to him. And I'm like, I need some of that. And so that's what drove me into football. And then it seems like the better I played, the further I went, the more pats on the back I got, the more attention I was getting, adoration I was getting, and that just kind of drove me to be even better at it.
So you weren't even necessarily playing football because you looked up to some heroes or
Right.
anything, or trying to make the league or college. You wanted adoration, validation, perhaps, and an outlet to kick people's ass.
Absolutely, because I said, my parents, there was so much going on. When you're trying to hustle and make money and all this other kind of stuff, and you got alcohol problems and fighting and all these different kind of drugs and everything that's going on, there's so much chaos that's happening that emotionally a lot of people aren't there for you. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, nowadays I can look back at it and say, like, man, like, I wish mental health was a thing back then. I'm sure it was a thing, but the attention to it was a thing back then, because it could have helped my family a lot, But not being able to get that stuff at home, that was the only place I knew where to get it. I'm telling you, guys coming up and pat me on the back. Like, I was a running back, believe it or not, and so I scored a lot of touchdowns, and so I got like a lot of foot-long hot dogs. Like, every time I scored a touchdown, so I essentially ate myself out of being a running back. But like that kind of stuff, I just wasn't getting that level of like hugs and pats on the back and just like, we see you. Like, I used to always say, like, all this stuff was happening in my house, and I felt like I was standing on the top of the mountain going, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, and nobody could see it. But when I was on the football field, people saw it, and so that's kind of what I thrived. That's what I wanted. I needed in my life was that. And I didn't know at the time that, I'm probably dealing with all types of trauma, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at the time, it was just like, that just feels good when I do it, and it feels different than when I'm at home, and that's what I want.
So it sounds like, you and I, we're older men now, and there's this thing going around called love language, right? Read the book. Here was your love language. So it sounds like your love language was words of affirmation and just like affection. And you necessarily weren't getting that at home. So you got on that football field, and it filled a void, something that you didn't even know that you needed at the time.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, yeah, if I had to put words to it nowadays, I would use like the words of affirmation or even quality time. Like my parents would be in the same room with me, but they're not present. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So like, my dad is like worrying about work or paying bills or fixing the water pipe that just burst. My mom is trying to come home from work and cook, and then she's drinking, and my dad is playing poker, all this other kind of stuff that's going on. My sisters have dudes coming in and out of the back window, all this stuff is going on, and then there's me, and it's just like, man, like how do you find a place for yourself in the middle of all this? And on the football field, I had a place. It was a family. I would imagine that it's kind of what draws people to games a lot. Like is that you have this place where you belong or where you kind of fit in. People acknowledge you, whether it's healthy or not. You've been kind of acknowledged that way, and that's kind of what football became to me. It just became this place. Nowadays, I guess they would call it a safe place, but it became a place where I could kind of express and release some of this stuff I was feeling in my body, but then also where I got to get people, like I said, to be like, man, look at this kid. We want this kid on our team, or he's going to be the starting this or the starting that, or he does this really well. Like I just wasn't getting a whole lot of that, from home.
So you found your safe place on that football field. You mentioned your mom, how she took care of everybody. Your dad, he's grinding, he's working, he knows everybody. But there are also some things that were happening at home, some abusive behavior. Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so like I said, my dad was doing the best he could. You know what I'm saying? Nowadays, like when I can look back at it, it doesn't make me happy. But my dad was a really demanding dude. Especially of my mom. My mom worked hard, would have to come home, cook, and then like if one corner of the cornbread was burnt, my dad would just lose it. The rest of the meal can be like awesome,
it's perfect,
but it's just one piece that wasn't right, or if it didn't have it done fast enough, or all those different kinds of things. It wasn't like we had a big house to clean and nothing like that. It was always a mess anyway. But my dad was like really demanding that way, and nowadays thinking about all the stuff that the pressure he was under, I can see it in a different light. But they would go out and party on Fridays and Saturdays, and it got to the point where when they would come home, I could tell just by the tone in which the door closed on the car if I needed to start finding somewhere to hide, because they were going to start fighting. Like, and I'm talking about like yelling at each other. I'm talking about fist fighting, like punching each other, beating each other. My dad hit my mom fighting back, all these different kinds of things. And just when you're a little kid and you're watching this stuff, happen to your mom, even though like it's hard to say who. My dad should not have been hitting my mom.
Right.
But, my mom was hitting my mom was doing some stuff too.
And was fighting.
Right, they were fighting. And so, but I just always felt like I could never put myself in a position to help my mom because I was little. My dad was this big dude. And my dad was a fighter. No one fought my dad. Nobody. Like in my neighborhood, there would be fights going on. There was this big dude named Big John, and he was about 400 pounds. He could knock anybody out. Golden Gloves champ, would not fight my dad. My dad was like that dude. And so this is this is a dude that's like fighting my mom. And so it was really hard for me. He never, I got caught stealing a Matchbox car out of Kmart one time. And my dad, gave me a whipping for that. That was the only time my dad ever touched me. But, I've seen him, slap my sisters or something other like that. So that was really hard. It was really hard to deal with and know what to do with. And so as I grew up, it was just like, man, what can I do to protect my mom? And then the fact that you couldn't do anything was tremendously tough to deal with, because all I could do is just really just tuck tail and run, because I'm like, I can't deal with that dude. That dude will smash me, And so part of I know we'll get to it, but part of my first year at University of Virginia playing football was just to prepare myself to fight my dad, So it was my dad, like I said at the beginning, love him to death. There's a lot of things that helped me be who I am. But there's things about my dad that wasn't so pleasant, and that was one of them.
Could you talk to anybody about what was going on at the time?
You know what, man? It's like in our neighborhood, that's just kind of what it was. You know what I'm saying? Like you saw husbands fighting their wives and stuff all the time. That's just kind of what it, it's almost like what was expected. You know what I'm saying? It's just like our neighborhood was just a bunch of dysfunction, and it was a small little neighborhood in the middle of this is an African-American neighborhood in the middle of a larger, middle-class white neighborhood. But we were this little poor section, or people don't like when I say poor, but underserved or, under-resourced part of it. And but that's just kind of what you saw all the time. You just saw women getting beat all the time, and you saw dudes selling drugs, or back then it was mostly weed and all this stuff, drinking, robbing, stealing, like all those kinds of things. We used to have this dude. That used to steal the trailway buses all the time, and just come. Police chase him. He just riding through the neighborhood. Hand out the window in the big trailway bus, just like coming down the road. We had this other dude that used to drink a lot in the neighborhood. We called him Goat, and this is when they had the the fire alarms on the telephone poles. He would pull them all the time and just watch the fire trucks come and stuff like that. So it was just like a lot of chaos going on in our neighborhood. The one like combining force was, or the two was, we had a basketball court and there was a football field, and like that would be the place where the whole neighborhood kind of gravitated towards. But other than that, it's a neighborhood full of craziness, chaos. So it really wasn't. If you go to someone and be like, man, this is what's happening in my house, they'll be like, yep, that's what's happening in my house too. You know what I'm saying? So like, in that school, you don't know what to say because you don't want your dad to get arrested, and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't know, what to do.
So so you get to the University of Virginia. How do you end up there?
Well, it's an interesting story too because I was playing football obviously, and it's like right before my 11th grade year, I went to my coach. I'm like, yo, man, like, got all these letters from these colleges want me to come play football there, but we can't afford college. And he was like, Ray, bring me the letters. And so I had like these 2 trash bags full of letters. I take them in, and he's like, dude, they're going to pay for your college. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, they give you a scholarship. I'm like, what's a scholarship? So it took my coach probably like 2 weeks to explain to me what all this whole process. Well, then I had to go explain that to my dad. My dad was like, nah, bro, that bill is coming. Like, you're not setting me up. You don't get anything for free. He's like, free lunch isn't even for free. He's like, so you ain't going to college, bro. You're going to have to go to military, grab McDonald's or something, but you ain't, you're not doing this college thing. I'm like, Dad, I'm telling you, they say they'll pay for everything. And so then finally got my dad on board, and then took some trips, did all that. Had originally committed to play at Tennessee, and then had one trip left. I was going to come out to visit UCLA, and I figured my parents would never be able to see me play out at UCLA. So I canceled that trip and took this trip to Virginia. And Virginia had lost to William & Mary. And I was just like, I was playing defensive end at the time. I'm like, yeah, I can play here next year. So when I ride home, I told my dad, hey, I think I'm going to go to Virginia. And he pulled over like, what? Like, we just went to see Tennessee, Auburn, 100,000 people. At the time, Virginia stadium was like maybe 47,000. And he's like, I'm like, but Dad, I can play like right away up here. And these dudes just kind of fit my mentality better. So that's kind of how I ended up at the University of Virginia.
So Virginia not only gave you a chance to continue the football thing, but you also, like you mentioned earlier, it was a place where you could get right so you could stand up to Pops.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So like no one ever really knew this, but this is when I got to college, our strength coach was this dude named John Gamble. And he used to be like the world's strongest drug-free power lifter. Dude was like maybe 6 foot tall, chest huge chest, big arms, could pick up 80-pound dumbbells just with one hand, and just like, hey, you need this, Ray? I'm like, yeah, And when I saw him, I'm like, okay, this dude is our strength coach. I'm gonna be strong like him, and then I'm gonna go home and I'm taking on my dad. And so I would work out like 3 times a day. I get up in the morning, I work out with John. I come in and work out like around lunchtime, and then I work out after practice. All just to get strong enough so that when I got home on Christmas break, my dad would know that I was in the fight. Because I knew I still wasn't going to be able to win the fight, but I wanted him to know that I was in the fight. And I'm just like, I don't want him to ever touch my mom again, and I want him to know that I'm in the fight. And so I get home on Christmas, and I took a trailway bus, by the way. It's a 5-hour drive. It took 24 hours on a trailway bus because, every stop is a bus stop. Mm-hmm. So by the time I get home, dude, like, I'm just like, I'm ready to go. Like, I'm just waiting for my dad to even look at my mom the wrong way, and I'm just going all in, even if it's just like a quick little sucker punch, just to be able to say I got one in. And when we got home, something was different. It was just like, wow, like the feeling, the vibe here is different, and I could feel it. And so I'm waiting for the weekend to come, like, oh, it's going to happen. They're going to do their thing, and then da-da-da-da, and I'm going to be able to help my mom. And while I was in college, my dad had completely given his life to Christ. And so from that point on, never touched my mom again. And so I lived a lot of the rest of my adult life with that ready to fight thing, my dad in me. It never went away, and I never knew what to do with it. It was just always there. I always wanted to defend my mom's honor, and never got a chance to the way that I wanted to, because she deserved it. and I'm the only son, and so I was never able to do that. You know what I'm saying? So it was hard. It was tough. It was tough. Um, uh, Playing football, been in this industry where you're supposed to be this big tough dude, and having this emptiness inside of you going, but you never got to defend your mom. You know what I'm saying? And so I struggled with that for a long, long time, for a long by myself. Nobody knew. The lady that ended up becoming my wife didn't know. My coaches, teammates, nobody knew that, but it was just something that I carried with me for a really long time.
When you got home and you saw that your dad had changed and the vibe was different, how did that change your relationship with your dad and your mom?
Well, my dad then treated my mom like a queen. Like if my mom just looked at the refrigerator, he'd just be up like, "What do you want?" My dad would cook. He's a great cook. He would cook for her. He would clean, like all the whatever my mom needed. He would try to provide for her, to the point where my girlfriend, who became my wife, she and her family, that's the only race senior they knew.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so they thought my dad was the greatest person in the world, and it would just freaking tear me up inside. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys don't know. You guys have no idea what this dude is capable of, you know? And so that just kind of ate at me, you know, all the time. And then I remember one time I told my wife at the time, you know, just kind of like what it was like. And it was just kind of like, they're like, "You're crazy. There's no way." I'm like, "Yeah, this is that dude," you know? And so it was just, it became hard because I couldn't trust in what I was seeing, because I just kept waiting for something was going to go down, or I would, like, every time I would see my mom, I'd be like trying to see if I see any bruises or anything, because I'm like, there's no way that this dude just stopped. And he did. He just stopped. He stopped smoking cigarettes and weed. He stopped drinking. He stopped gambling. He stopped hitting my mom, and just kind of was all into the church stuff, and just was that way for the rest of his life. And it was really difficult to deal with. Like, even it was 1997. I was playing for the Detroit Lions. It was a Wednesday practice, and they called me off the field and was like, "Hey, something's going down with your dad." And I'm like, "What's going on?" My dad had gone to the hospital for a routine checkup. He had diabetes, and while he was there, he had a stroke. And so he was in a coma. And so on Thursday, Mr. Ford put me on this private flight plane, flew me and my family to Asheville. I was there for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then my dad was he was still hooked up to all these tubes, and they were asking me to make all these decisions. My sisters wouldn't do it, my mom wouldn't do it. And so then I was like, man, like, what would people always say, like, "Oh man, like, my loved one would have wanted me to stay here and be with my family." And I was like, man, my dad would want me to go play football. And so on Saturday, I flew back to Detroit. They when I landed, they were like, "Oh yeah, your dad is doing better." They're moving him to like out of ICU into like a regular room, and it's about an hour and a half drive from the airport to where I lived in Detroit. By the time I got home, my dad had died. And so now I'm in Detroit on Saturday, the night before the game, trying to decide if I should play this game or if I should go home. And so I was like, you know what? My dad would want me to play this game. And so we're playing Atlanta Falcons. Second quarter, we scored a touchdown. This defensive end, Chuck Smith from University of Tennessee, punched me in the stomach. And then I just started, all of that emotion just came out. And I just throwing punches at everybody. Yelled at the referee. I was ready to fight the referee. They kicked me out of the game in the second quarter. And then Mr. Ford said, "Hey, man, grab your family, go home." And then we went home, buried my dad on that Tuesday, and then was back in Detroit on Thursday, played the rest of the season, didn't miss a game. But there was a point during that season where this is like my first, like, encounter with this mental health thing. There was, like, where I was aware of something. And I was just, like, in games just thinking about my dad, like, and the ball was snapped. And I'm like, oh, crap, like, I got to block, these pass rushers that are trying to kill the quarterback. So I go to the team like, dude, like, I'm having all these thoughts about my dad in the games. I need to talk to somebody. And they were just, at the time, the mental health thing wasn't a deal. And they're just, like, looking at me like, are you broken or something? And it's like, they didn't know what to do. And so I ended up meeting with this dude in Detroit in the middle of the night, downtown Detroit, and because they didn't want people to see me coming and going and stuff. And in this in this therapy session, this dude told me to write a letter to my dad, and I'm just like, my dad is dead. Like, what do you mean write a letter to my dad? And so then maybe a week or two later, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just started writing, and it was just all anger, all that pent up, didn't get to defend my mom stuff was just coming out on paper, and I just let it float. I probably wrote maybe 8 or 10 pages front and back, just going off on my dad, just vomiting everything I could think of, and then at the end of it, I wasn't a real spiritual dude at the time. I couldn't figure out how to end it. I didn't want to say like I love you or like that didn't feel right, and so I said I forgive you, and I didn't even know what forgiveness meant, but that's what I said, and it seems like when I said that, this idea of like this dude I wanted to beat the hell out of just kind of went away, and then the dude that was always making sure that my grades were right, never missed anything I was in, whether it's a play or football game, basketball game, made sure I got a practice, like made sure I had a roof over my head. Like that dude then was a dude that I could remember. You know what I'm saying? The forgiveness allowed me to see the goodness in my dad and put away some of the bad things that was part of his life. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition. Look forward to having you guys listen to the second episode where we'll dive a little bit deeper into life after football and my mental health journey.